Okay, we're going to get started on installing the ACE JL or JT front inner fender. It's the same part, works for both models. AJ, what tools are we going to need here?
10mm nut driver or ratchet and socket, a automotive panel puller, and two 7/16 open end wrenches.
We're going to have a pair of inner fenders and the hardware pack in the box. Our first step is going to be remove the stock inner fender. How are we going to do that?
We're going to start by removing these 3 bolts from the factory with the 10mm nut driver.
And we're going to want to save those bolts.
Correct, save for reuse.
All right, those bolts are out. Okay, the next step is we're going to remove these little Christmas trees that hold the inner fender in, and we've got 7 of those.
Yes, there's a total of 7. 2 at the rear of the inner fender. There's going to be 1, 2, 3 here, 4 here, and 1 back there is the 5th one there. So for a total of 7.
Okay, let's do that. Just use the automotive panel remover tool. Okay, that's all 7.
Just wiggle it a little bit here.
All right, that's it for removal of the stock inner fender. Now we'll go ahead and install our ACE inner fender.
So per side, you're going to have 4 of this assembly in the hardware pack and 1 of these regular stainless steel hex nuts. Now we're going to install this bolt with the hex nut through this hole coming from the back side.
All right, so you got to get your fingers in there and get that first bolt through that bracket, okay?
Then install the regular hex nut without nylock insert.
All right, so that looks like that once you've got that piece installed. All right, so the next step is we're going to put an open-ended wrench on the back side of that bolt and another open-ended wrench on the front side and tighten that up. All right, before we put the inner fender in place, we've got to do some modifications here.
We're going to remove these 2 clips, taking the wire harness out of those holes.
And that's, as you can see here, in the rear of the fender well. And we're just gonna clip that in there, keep that wire back and out of the way. Next, we're gonna take the inner fender and get it into that well. So, gonna work around the tire, get it in place. All right, so once we've got the inner fender inside the well in place, the first thing we're gonna do is install this front bolt, right?
Yep, we're going to install this onto the bolt that we already have in location.
All right. We'll slide that on.
With that in location, we're going to take one of the remaining bolts, slide it up through the inner fender, through the hole in this bracket.
And then we're gonna put a nut
on the top.
on the top.
Yep.
And tighten that in. All right, once we have that top bolt in place and hand tightened, then we're gonna kind of move to the rear of the fender well. There we are, okay. The bottom bolt with a washer in place. Push through the mounting hole, and then we're just putting a nut All right, once the bottom bolt is on and hand tightened with the nut from behind, then we just repeat the process for the bolt above that. Okay, once those rear bolts are in place, then we're going to move back up to the front bracket that we did first, where we already installed that nut and bolt, and we're going to thread on the nylon nut now, right?
Correct.
You're going to come up through there. Now that all the bolts are in place and they're hand tightened out of the nuts, we're going to grab a wrench and we're going to just go back through, tighten down all those bolts.
All right, so now we're going to reinstall the 3 factory bolts that we removed. The shortest bolt goes at the frontmost part of the fender.
And these aren't actually attaching our inner fender. These are just making sure your factory fender is secure. So you just secure those bolts back in place, and that's it. Job is done. Okay, all the bolts are now tightened up, and that's it. That's the end of the install. You guys finished. Time to crack a beer and enjoy the new look on your Jeep.